Clara Jennings dropped to her knees in the dirt and wrapped both arms around 8-year-old Sadie as the boarding house door slammed behind them. Their carpetbag landed in the dust. The July sun beat down like a punishment from God, and the child was shaking not from cold, but from the shock of being called a beggar's brat by a woman with no heart. Clara pressed her lips to the girl's hair and whispered the only lie she had left. "It's gonna be all right, sweetheart. I promise." She didn't believe it. Not anymore. If this story touches your heart, subscribe and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far our story travels. The owner of the Elk Creek boarding house was a stout woman named Mrs. Grady, and she had the kind of voice that carried 3 blocks in every direction. "I said get out, and don't come back crying to my door, you hear me?" Clara stood slowly pulling Sadie up with her. The girl's fingers dug into Clara's skirt, holding on the way a drowning child holds a branch. "Ma'am, I paid through Wednesday. That's 2 more days." "You paid with a check that bounced like a rubber ball is what you did." Mrs. Grady folded her thick arms across her chest and planted herself in the doorway. "I run a decent establishment, not a charity house for drifters and their strays." Clara felt Sadie flinch at that word, strays, as if the child were a dog wandering the road. She put her hand on the back of Sadie's neck, warm, steady, protective. "The check is good. The bank in Independence holds the funds. It takes time to clear across territories." "Time I ain't got. Patience I ain't got neither." Mrs. Grady jerked her chin toward the street. "Move on!" Clara looked at the woman, really looked at her. There was no mercy there, not an ounce. She'd seen that look before on the faces of creditors who took her house on the matron at St. Mary's Orphanage, who told her love was a luxury poor girls couldn't afford. She picked up the carpetbag. She took Sadie's hand, and she walked. The main street of Elk Creek, Wyoming Territory was a river of dust in July. Heat rose from the packed earth in visible waves. Clara's dress, mended at the sleeves, faded from too many washings, clung to her back with sweat. Sadie's bonnet had fallen back, and her thin brown hair was already damp at the temples. "Clara, where we going?" "Forward, baby. Always forward." "But forward to where?" Clara didn't answer. Because she didn't have one. They'd come to Elk Creek on a promise, a letter from the town council offering a teaching position. Clara had spent the last of Thomas's hidden savings on 2 stagecoach tickets across 3 territories. She'd arrived yesterday, walked into the schoolhouse with her credentials and her best dress, and found another woman already at the chalkboard. "Position's been filled," the clerk at the land office told her, not even looking up from his ledger. "Mrs. Prescott's niece got the appointment last month. But I have the letter, signed by the council. Things change, ma'am." Things change. 2 words that had chased Clara Jennings across 1,000 miles of heartbreak. Now she walked past the general store, past the blacksmith, past the saloon where men sat on the porch and watched her with the idle curiosity people give to things that don't concern them. A woman, alone with a child and a carpetbag, not interesting enough to help, not important enough to notice. "I'm thirsty," Sadie whispered. Clara stopped. She knelt down eye level with the girl and smoothed the hair from her forehead. The child's skin was too hot. Her lips were dry and cracked. "I know, sweetheart. Give me just a minute." She looked around. The public well was at the end of the street near the livery stable. She led Sadie there, set down the carpetbag, and worked the pump handle until water sputtered out warm at first, then cooler. She cupped her hands and brought water to Sadie's lips. "Drink slow." Sadie drank, then looked up with those big brown eyes that had owned Clara's heart since the night she found her bundled in a flour sack on the boarding house steps in Independence. "Are we going to sleep outside tonight?" "No." "You promise?" Clara hesitated. She never lied to Sadie, not about the hard things, but sometimes the truth was a cruelty an 8-year-old shouldn't have to carry. "I promise." Another lie. That made 2 in one day. She was getting good at it. Well now. The voice came from behind her dry, graveled belonging to a man who looked like the desert had chewed him up and spit him back out tougher. He was maybe 60, lean as a fence post, with a weathered face and pale blue eyes that had seen more than they wanted to. He wore the clothes of a working man, dusty boots, worn chaps, a hat that had lost its original shape years ago. "You the school teacher who come in on yesterday's stage?" Clara straightened. "I am. Or I was supposed to be." "Yeah, heard about that." He spat in the dust, shaking his head. "Prescott business. That woman's got her fingers in everything." He looked at Sadie. "This your girl?" "She's mine." It came out fierce. It always did when anyone questioned the bond. Clara had no legal papers, no blood claim, no court decree. She had something stronger: 3 years of holding that child through nightmares, spooning broth through fevers, teaching her letters by candlelight when the oil was almost gone. The old man raised both hands. "Didn't mean nothing by it. Name's Hank Dawson. I'm foreman out at Thornton Ranch. Clara Jennings." "Mrs. Jennings, you look like you're in a hard spot." "I'm managing." "Uh-huh." Hank looked at Sadie again. The child was sitting on the carpet bag now, her head drooping. "That little one ain't managing so well. He'll take a child down fast out here. Faster than folks expect." Clara's chest tightened. She knew that. She could already see the signs: the flushed cheeks, the glazed eyes, the way Sadie's breathing had gone shallow. "Is there a church in town somewhere we could sit in the shade?" "Church is locked till Sunday. Reverend went to Cheyenne." Hank scratched the back of his neck. "Look, the ranch is about 4 miles east. We got Watershade, a bunkhouse with empty rooms. The boss ain't always the friendliest man, but he ain't never turned away a woman and child in need. I don't take charity." "Good. 'Cause I ain't offering charity. I'm offering common sense. You stay out here another 2 hours in this heat with that girl, and Doc Harlan's gonna be treating her for heat stroke. You want that?" Clara looked at Sadie. The child's eyes were closed now, her small body curling in on itself against the base of the well. Pride or the child? It was always that choice, and the child always won. 4 miles. "Got my wagon right there." Hank pointed to a buckboard with 2 mules hitched in front of the feed store. "Was in town for supplies. You ain't even out of my way." Clara picked up Sadie, settling the girl against her shoulder. The child weighed almost nothing. That had always scared Clara, how light she was, as if the world hadn't given her enough substance to hold her down. "All right. Thank you, Mr. Dawson." "Just Hank. Everybody calls me Hank." He carried her carpet bag to the wagon and helped her up onto the bench seat. Sadie lay across Clara's lap, already half asleep. Hank clicked his tongue, and the mules started forward. They rode in silence for a while. The land opened up around them, rolling grassland stretching toward mountains that looked painted against the sky. Despite everything, Clara felt something ease in her chest. There was space here, room to breathe. Missouri had been green and closed. Wyoming was gold and endless. "So what's your story?" Hank asked, keeping his eyes on the road. "Does it matter?" "Not to me, but the boss'll ask. He asks about everybody." "I'm a widow. My husband died 3 years ago. I was a teacher in Independence. I answered an advertisement for a position in Elk Creek. The position was given to someone else. That's all there is. That ain't all there is, and we both know it, but it'll do for now." Clara almost smiled. She liked this man. He was direct without being cruel, a rare combination in her experience. "This boss of yours, what should I know?" Hank was quiet for a moment. "Caleb Thornton, 34 years old. Owns the biggest ranch in the territory. Fair man, hard man. Keeps his word and expects the same from others. And he ain't smiled since Lincoln was president, near as I can tell. He's got a wall around him thicker than the stone on his ranch house. Lost his mama and sister young. His daddy raised him like feelings were a weakness, so he locked him up and threw away the key. Sounds lonely. Loneliest man I ever knew. Not that he'd admit it. He'd sooner brand himself than say he needed anybody. Clara looked down at Sadie's sleeping face. She understood walls. She'd built her own high-thick reinforced every time the world tried to knock them down. The difference was, she'd had Sadie to keep a door open. Some people weren't that lucky. The ranch appeared gradually, first a fence line stretching to the horizon, then cattle dotting the hills, then buildings taking shape through the heat shimmer. The main house was stone and timber solid as the land it sat on. A wide porch wrapped around the front, and cottonwood trees threw patches of shade across the yard. Cowboys moved between the barn and corrals. A dog barked somewhere. It was alive in a way Clara hadn't expected. Not just a house, but a working world. Hank pulled the wagon up to the porch and set the brake. "Wait here." He went inside. Clara sat on the wagon bench holding Sadie, listening to the creak of windmill blades turning in the hot breeze. 2 minutes. 5. She was about to climb down on her own when the front door opened, and her heart stopped. He was taller than she remembered, broader. The lean young man who'd danced with her at the harvest ball in St. Joseph had filled out into something formidable. His dark hair was longer, pushed back from a face that had hardened with years and weather. His jaw was set in a line that looked permanent. But those eyes, God help her, those eyes. Dark amber, almost copper in the sunlight. She'd dreamed about those eyes for 10 years, woke up reaching for them in the dark. He didn't recognize her. She saw him look, a quick assessment, the way a man looks at any stranger on his property. Woman, child, trouble. Nothing more. "Hank says you need shelter." His voice, deeper now, rougher, but the same. Clara gripped Sadie tighter and forced herself to breathe. "Just for tonight, until I can arrange passage back east. That child's sick. Heat exhaustion. She needs water and shade. I can tend to her myself." He came down the porch steps 3 strides long and certain. He stopped at the wagon and looked at Sadie. Something shifted in his expression. It was quick, a crack in the stone that sealed itself almost before Clara could register it. "Bring her inside." "Mr. Thornton, I don't want to impose." "It's 104 degrees. The child's lips are blue dry and her breathing's wrong. You can stand on pride, or you can bring her inside. Pick one." Clara picked the child. She always picked the child. She climbed down from the wagon. His hand came up in instinct and offered to help her step, and their fingers touched. The shock went through her, like lightning splitting a summer sky. She saw his hand twitch, saw something flicker in those amber eyes. Confusion, maybe. The ghost of a memory that couldn't quite find its shape. He pulled his hand back. So did she. "This way." She followed him through the front door, down a hallway, into a room with a wide bed, drawn curtains, and blessed coolness. She laid Sadie on the bed and immediately began loosening the girl's collar, removing her boots, feeling her pulse. "I need cool water, not cold, cool, clean cloths. And if you have any dried peppermint or elderflower in your kitchen, I need those too." He stood in the doorway watching her work. "You a doctor?" "No, just a woman who couldn't afford one." Something changed in his face again. That flicker, that searching look, as if he were hearing music he couldn't place. "Hank," he called without turning his head. "Boss. Tell Rosa cool water, clean cloths, peppermint if we've got it." "On it." Caleb looked at Clara. She felt the weight of that gaze like a hand on her shoulder. He was trying to read her, and she was terrified of what he might find. "What's your name?" Her throat tightened. 10 years ago, she'd laughed when he asked that question. "Names don't matter tonight," she'd said. "Only this, only us." "Clara Jennings, widow." She said widow the way a woman builds a fence, deliberate, clear, meant to keep things out. "And the girl?" "Sadie, my daughter." No hesitation this time. No ward, no charge, no qualifier. "Mine." He nodded once. "I'll send Rosa in. You need anything else, pull that bell cord." He turned to leave. At the doorway, he stopped, one hand on the frame. His back was to her, and she watched the tension in his shoulders, a man fighting something he didn't understand. Mrs. Jennings. Yes? Have we met before? The room went silent. Even the windmill outside seemed to hold its breath. Clara looked at the back of his head, the dark hair curling at his collar, the set of his neck, the width of those shoulders she'd once watched across a lantern-lit dance floor in Missouri, and thought, that's the man I'm going to love for the rest of my life. No, Mr. Thornton, I don't believe we have. He stood there another moment. Then he walked away, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Clara sank into the chair beside Sadie's bed. Her hands were trembling. Her whole body was trembling. She pressed her palms together and held them against her mouth. Of all the towns in all the territories, of all the ranches on all the plains, she'd walked straight back to him. Sadie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Clara, where are we? Somewhere safe, baby. Who was that man? Clara smoothed the girl's hair. Nobody, just a rancher. He's got sad eyes. Clara closed her own. Because Sadie, who noticed everything, who saw through every mask adults thought they wore so well, had found the truth in 5 seconds that Clara had been running from for 10 years. Yeah, she whispered. He does. An older Mexican woman named Rosa came in with a basin of water cloths and a small pouch of dried peppermint. She didn't ask questions, just set everything down, and gave Clara a look of quiet solidarity, one woman recognizing another woman's fight. Clara worked quickly. She soaked the cloths in cool water and laid them on Sadie's forehead, her wrists, the insides of her elbows. She brewed weak peppermint tea in a cup Rosa had left, and coaxed Sadie to sip it slowly. Not too fast, sweetheart. It tastes like the garden back home. Home. The word hit Clara like a fist. They hadn't had a home in 2 years. Just rooms, borrowed beds, other people's charity dressed up as arrangements. You rest now. Close your eyes. Will you be here when I wake up? Always. That was the one promise Clara never broke. In a life full of things she couldn't control, money, men, fate, weather, she could control this. She could be there. Every single time that child opened her eyes, Clara Jennings would be there. Sadie drifted off. Clara sat in the quiet room, listening to the child's breathing grow steadier, deeper. The peppermint was working. The cool cloths were doing their job. In an hour, maybe 2, the danger would pass. But another danger was just beginning. She was in Caleb Thornton's house, breathing his air, standing on his floors. And he was already suspicious, already asking questions her lies couldn't hold against forever. Because here's the truth. Clara carried like a stone in her chest. She had never stopped loving him. Not when she married Thomas Jennings, a kind and steady man who deserved better than a wife whose heart lived in another state. Not when Thomas died and the creditors came and took everything. Not through 2 years of scraping by on sewing work and teaching children for pennies. Not even when she told herself over and over that the man who danced with her under the stars in St. Joseph and then disappeared without a word had never cared at all. She'd loved Caleb Thornton at 18 with the whole blazing force of a girl who'd never been loved back by anyone. And she loved him still at 28 with the quieter, more terrible love of a woman who knew exactly what it cost. From down the hallway, she heard his voice low-clipped giving orders to someone about fence posts and water lines. Business as usual. A man running his empire. He had no idea the woman in his guest room was the ghost that haunted his past. But he would. Secrets like this didn't keep. Not in a house this small. Not with a heart this loud. Clara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling it pound. God help me, she thought. I walked 4 miles to the one place on earth I should never be. And I can't even leave because that girl on that bed needs me more than I need to run. She looked at Sadie, small, fragile, trusting, and made a decision. She would stay until the child was strong enough to travel. She would keep her distance. She would guard her secret. And when the time came, she would walk away from Caleb Thornton for the second time in her life. Even if it killed her. Even if it already was. Outside, the Wyoming sun blazed on. The windmill turned. The cattle moved across the hills like slow dark rivers. And somewhere in the main house, Caleb Thornton sat at his desk, staring at nothing, trying to understand why the sound of a stranger's voice had made his hands shake for the first time in 10 years. Sadie woke up screaming at midnight. Clara was on her feet before the echo died, crossing from the chair where she'd dozed to the bed in 2 steps. The child was sitting up, eyes wild, hands clawing at the sheets like something was crawling on her skin. Sadie! Sadie, look at me! It's burning, Clara. My head's burning. Clara pressed her palm to the girl's forehead, and her stomach dropped. The heat coming off that small body was like touching a stove lid. This wasn't heat exhaustion anymore. This was fever, the kind that killed children on the frontier, the kind that had no mercy and no patience. Okay, baby. Okay. I'm right here. She grabbed the bell cord and pulled hard. Twice. 3 times. Then she stripped back the heavy quilt and started working. Loosening Sadie's nightgown, reaching for the basin of water Rosa had left. It was warm now, useless. She needed fresh. She needed cold. The door opened fast. It was Caleb. He wasn't dressed for sleep. He wore the same clothes from earlier: trousers, boots, shirt with the sleeves rolled. He'd been awake, working or pacing or doing whatever lonely men do at midnight when the house is too quiet. What happened? Fever. High. It spiked in the last hour. Clara didn't look up. She was wringing a cloth and pressing it to Sadie's wrists. I need cold water from the well, not the pump, the deep well. And I need it now. He didn't ask another question. He turned and walked out. She heard his boots on the stairs, fast the front door opening, and then nothing. Sadie was crying now, not loud, not dramatic, but that thin, exhausted whimper that scared Clara more than screaming ever could. A screaming child was fighting. A whimpering child was giving up. Don't you quit on me, Sadie Mae. Don't you dare. I want my mama. Clara's hands went still. In 3 years, Sadie had never said that. She'd never had a mama to miss. Clara was everything she'd ever known. I'm right here, baby. No, I want my real mama. The one who left me. The words cut deeper than any knife. Clara swallowed hard, pushed the pain down where it couldn't reach her hands, and kept working. Your real mama is the one holding you right now, and she ain't going nowhere. The door banged open. Caleb came through carrying a bucket of well water cold enough that condensation ran down the sides. Behind him, Rosa appeared in a shawl, her dark hair braided for sleep, carrying an armful of clean cloths. Set it here. Clara pointed to the bedside table. Rosa, do you have willow bark? Dried chamomile. Anything. See? I have willow bark and yarrow. Bring both, and honey if you have it. Rosa disappeared. Caleb set the bucket down and stood there watching Clara work. She soaked cloth after cloth in the cold water, laying them across Sadie's forehead, her neck, the insides of her small elbows. Tell me what to do. Clara glanced up. He stood with his hands half raised like a man who wanted to help but didn't know how. There was something raw in his face, not pity, not obligation. Something older. Wet those cloths and wring them out. Not too dry. I need to change them every few minutes. He moved to the basin immediately. No hesitation, no comment about how this wasn't his problem or his child. He just did it. His big hands built for roping and branding and breaking horses worked the cloth with surprising care. How long has she been sick? He asked. The heat started it. But she's always been fragile. She was born small and she stayed small. Every cold, every fever hits her twice as hard as other children. Born where? I don't know. Clara's voice caught. She was left on a doorstep. Nobody came back for her. Caleb handed her a fresh cloth. Their fingers brushed. He pulled back quick, but not quick enough. Clara had felt it, that same jolt from earlier, like grabbing a fence wire in a lightning storm. Rosa returned with a small tin of dried willow bark, a pouch of yarrow, and a jar of honey. Clara measured by instinct, a pinch of bark crushed between her fingers, steeped in a cup of hot water Rosa had thought to bring. She added honey to cut the bitterness. "Sadie, I need you to drink this." "Don't want to." "I know, but your body's fighting something bad, and this is going to help it win." "What if it doesn't?" "Then I'll make something stronger. But this first, small sips." Clara lifted the girl's head, cradling it in the crook of her arm. Sadie sipped, grimaced, tried to turn away. Clara held steady. "2 more sips, baby. That's all. 2 more, and you can rest." Sadie obeyed. Then her head dropped back and her eyes closed. Her breathing was fast and shallow, too fast. Clara laid her down and pressed her ear to the small chest. The heartbeat was racing, a frightened bird trapped behind fragile ribs. "Is it bad?" Caleb asked from beside her. She hadn't realized he'd moved so close. "Bad enough." Clara sat back on the edge of the bed. "The next few hours will tell. If the fever breaks before dawn, she'll be all right. If it doesn't—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. "Is there a doctor in town?" she asked. "Doc Harlan. But he rode out to the Miller homestead yesterday. Their boy broke his leg. Might not be back till Thursday." "Then it's just us." "Then it's just us." He repeated it like he was making a promise. They settled into a rhythm, Clara monitoring Sadie's breathing and temperature. Caleb changing the cold compresses with a steadiness that surprised her. He didn't fumble. He didn't complain. He just worked hour after hour, taking direction from a woman he'd met that afternoon, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. At 2 a.m, Sadie started shaking. Hard, violent tremors that rattled the bed frame. Clara gathered the child into her arms, holding her tight, pressing her own body heat against the girl's back, while keeping the cold cloths on her forehead. "Easy. Easy, sweetheart. I've got you." "Clara, I'm scared." "I know, but scared is just your body telling you it's working hard. Let it work. I'll do the rest." Caleb was on his knees beside the bed holding a fresh cloth. His face was tight, jaw locked, but his eyes, those amber eyes, were fixed on Sadie with an intensity that had nothing to do with duty. "She reminds me of someone." The words came out rough, almost unwilling. Clara looked at him over Sadie's trembling body. "Who?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Long time ago." But it did matter. Clara could see it in the way his hand hovered near Sadie's arm, not quite touching, in the way his breathing had changed. This wasn't a rancher tolerating a stranger's sick child in his guest room. This was a man reliving something. "Your sister," Clara said quietly. His head snapped up. "What?" "Hank told me, on the ride here, about your mother and your sister." Something dangerous moved through his face. "Hank talks too much. Hank cares about you. Hank's an old man with nothing better to do than spin stories." "What? Is it a story? Or is it the truth?" The silence stretched tight between them. Sadie's tremors were easing. Clara rubbed the girl's back in slow circles, her eyes still on Caleb. "Her name was Lily," he said finally, barely a whisper. "My sister. She was 6 when her heart gave out. My mama sat by her bed for 31 straight days. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't sleep. When Lily died, Mama lasted 6 months. Then she was gone too." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago. Pain doesn't care about time." He looked at her sharply. That searching expression was back, the one from the porch, the one from the doorway. Like she was a sentence in a language he'd forgotten how to read. "You talk like a woman who knows something about that." "Every woman knows something about that, Mr. Thornton. We just learn to carry it quieter than men." He almost smiled. Not quite, but the corner of his mouth moved, and for just a second, Clara saw the boy she'd danced with. The one who'd laughed when she told him names didn't matter. The one who'd looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd ever seen. Then it was gone. "Call me Caleb." "I don't think that's appropriate." "You're sitting on my guest bed at 2 in the morning, holding a sick child while I hand you wet cloths. I think we're past appropriate, Mrs. Jennings." This time Clara almost smiled. At 3:30, Sadie's fever peaked. The child's skin was fire, her pulse thready, her breathing harsh. Clara was on her feet working faster, mixing a stronger tea with yarrow and the last of the willow bark. Her hands were steady, but her heart was screaming. "Come on, baby. Come on. Fight this." Caleb moved without being asked. He lifted Sadie gently, so gently, as if the child were made of glass, and held her, while Clara changed the soaked sheets beneath her. Then he laid her back down with a tenderness that cracked something in Clara's chest. "You're good with her," she said before she could stop herself. "I'm good with things that need protecting." Their eyes met across the bed. The lamp between them threw golden light on his face, and Clara saw it all. The grief he'd bricked up behind 30 years of silence, the loneliness he wore like armor, the terrifying capacity for gentleness he'd buried so deep even he'd forgotten it existed. And beneath all of that, something else. Something that looked at her across the flickering light and almost remembered. "You should rest," he said. "I can watch her. I'm not leaving her. I didn't ask you to leave. I said rest. There's a difference. I rest when she's safe. She's safe." 2 words. Simple, direct, absolute. He said them the way other men said, "I love you," with the full weight of everything they were. Clara felt her eyes burn. She turned away fast, blinking hard. She would not cry. Not here. Not now. Not in front of him. Tears were a luxury she'd given up years ago, along with hope and silk dresses, and the belief that the world owed her anything. "Mrs. Jennings." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I'm fine." He didn't argue. He just took off his jacket and put it around her shoulders. The warmth hit her like a wave. Not just the physical heat, but the smell of him. Leather and cedar and clean sweat, and something underneath that was just Caleb, the same scent she'd breathed in when they'd danced too close at that harvest ball and the whole room had disappeared. She pulled the jacket tighter and said nothing. At 4:15, Sadie's forehead cooled. Clara pressed her hand there and felt the change, still warm, but the furious heat was fading. The child's breathing deepened. Her hands unclenched from the sheets. "Fever's breaking," Clara whispered. She felt the tension drain from the room like water from a cracked jug. Caleb let out a breath he must have been holding for an hour. Rosa, who had been hovering near the door, crossed herself and murmured a prayer. Clara bent down and kissed Sadie's forehead. "That's my girl. That's my brave girl." "Clara." Sadie's voice was small, drowsy, a million miles from the screaming child of midnight. "Right here." That man stayed. "What?" "The one with the sad eyes. He stayed all night. I could hear his voice." Clara looked at Caleb. He was standing by the window, arms crossed, face turned away, as if he were studying something in the dark that nobody else could see. But she could see the muscle working in his jaw, and the way his chest moved with breathing that wasn't quite steady. "Yeah, baby," Clara said softly. He stayed. Sadie smiled, a thin, exhausted smile, and fell asleep. Rosa quietly collected the basins and cloths and left the room. The door clicked shut, and then it was just the two of them standing on opposite sides of a sleeping child's bed, with the first pale suggestions of dawn pressing against the curtains. "Thank you." Clara's voice came out raw. "You didn't have to do any of this." "Yeah, I did." He turned from the window. His face was drawn with fatigue, but his eyes were clear. "Can I ask you something?" Clara's pulse spiked. "Depends on the question." "That night, when I asked if we'd met, you said no." "That's right." "You were lying." The air left the room. Clara felt it go, felt the walls close in and the floor tilt, and every carefully constructed defense she'd built over 10 years begin to tremble. Mr. Thornton. Caleb. I don't know what you're... St. Joseph, Harvest Ball, October 1868. His voice was low-controlled, but underneath it Clara could hear something breaking. You wore a blue dress, not silk cotton, but you'd sewn lace at the collar yourself. I could tell because the stitches were too small. Too careful. A rich woman would have had a seamstress do it. But you did it yourself because it mattered to you. Clara couldn't breathe. She physically could not draw air into her lungs. You danced with me twice. The second time I held you too close, and you didn't pull away. We talked in the garden after. You told me you'd grown up in an orphanage, and you weren't ashamed of it. You said shame was a cage people built to keep other people small. Stop. You told me your name didn't matter, that titles and families and all the rest of it was just noise. And I believed you because standing there with you was the first time in my life the noise actually stopped. Please stop. And then I let someone convince me you were a liar, that you were nothing, that you were beneath me. His voice cracked on the last word, a hairline fracture that ran through the entire foundation of who he pretended to be. And I walked away, and I have hated myself every single day since. Silence. The kind of silence that lives in the space between a lightning flash and the thunder that follows. The kind that holds its breath because what comes next will either heal or destroy. Clara looked at him across the bed. Sadie slept between them, innocent, unknowing the fragile bridge between two people who had spent a decade carrying wounds they never showed anyone. You remembered the stitches on my collar. Her voice was barely a sound. I remembered everything. He took one step around the bed. The way you laughed, not polite, not quiet, but real. Like you didn't care who heard. The way you smelled like soap and dried lavender. The way your hand felt in mine, and how I couldn't let go even when the music stopped. Then why did you... It was the question she'd carried for 10 years. The one she'd whispered into pillows in boarding houses across 3 states. The one she'd buried under a practical marriage and a dead husband's debts, and a child who needed her too much for her to fall apart. Why did you let go? His face broke. Not dramatically, not the way actors break in stage plays. It was worse. It was a man's jaw trembling because he was clenching it so hard his teeth might crack. It was eyes going bright and glassy while every muscle in his body fought to hold still. Because I was a coward. Because my aunt told me you were a fraud. Because I was 24 years old and terrified that what I felt for you in one night was bigger than anything I knew how to hold. And it was easier to believe you were a lie than to believe I'd found something real and had to fight for it. Clara's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, pressing hard using the pressure to hold herself together. Your aunt. Marguerite. She saw us at the ball. She had plans for me, a match with a family that would double our land holdings. You were a threat to that, so she destroyed you. She told you I was a con artist, the illegitimate daughter of a gambler. Yes. And you believed her, without asking me, without even writing a letter. Yes. The word hung in the air between them like a blade. I wrote to you, Clara said. 3 letters. I gave them to the postmaster in St. Joseph, addressed to the Thornton family. I never received them. Because your aunt intercepted them. Or because the postmaster knew which side his bread was buttered on. It doesn't matter. The result was the same. It matters to me. Why, what difference does it make now? Clara's voice rose for the first time. Not shouting, she wouldn't wake Sadie, but fierce, burning 10 years of swallowed rage pressing against her teeth. I waited. I waited for months. I checked the post every day until the postmaster started looking at me with pity. Do you know what that feels like? To be pitied by a man who sorts mail for a living? No. I married Thomas Jennings because he was kind and he asked and nobody else ever would. He was a good man, and I failed him every single day because my heart was in Wyoming with a rancher who threw me away like yesterday's newspaper." Caleb flinched. A full-body flinch, like she'd struck him across the face. "I did not throw you away." "You did. You just did it clean without blood so you could tell yourself it wasn't violence." He closed his eyes. His hands hung at his sides, fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. "I know." 2 words. No defense. No excuse. No justification. Clara stared at him, and for one terrible, beautiful moment, every wall she'd ever built came down. She saw him, not the powerful rancher, not the cold loner, not the man who'd broken her without knowing it. She saw the boy at the harvest ball, who'd held her hand like it was the first good thing he'd ever touched. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't stand in your house and open this up. I have a child to care for. I have nothing. No money, no position, no home. I cannot afford to feel this. Clara, don't." She held up her hand. "Don't say my name like that. Like it means something. You lost that right 10 years ago." He stood very still. Then he nodded slowly once. "You're right. I did." He stepped back. 1 step, then 2. Creating distance. Giving her room to breathe. "But I'm standing here telling you the truth, and I think maybe that's worth something, even if it's 10 years too late." Clara looked at Sadie. The child was sleeping peacefully now, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of safety. This girl, this abandoned, fragile, fierce little girl, was the only thing that mattered. Everything else was luxury. Including heartbreak, including love. "It's worth something," Clara said quietly, not looking at him. "But I don't know what yet." She heard him stand there for a long time. Then his boots moved slow, heavy, deliberate, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. She put her face in her hands. And for the first time in 3 years, she cried. Not the silent tears, she'd mastered the kind that slid down at night and dried before anyone could see. These were real, ugly. The kind that came from the place where she kept everything she couldn't afford to feel. She cried for the girl who'd sewn lace on a cotton collar and believed that was enough. She cried for the woman who'd married a good man she couldn't love. She cried for the mother she'd become to a child nobody wanted. And she cried for the thing pulsing in her chest right now, alive and terrified, and refusing to die no matter how many times she'd tried to kill it. Sadie stirred. Clara wiped her face fast hard using her sleeves. "Clara, you crying?" "No, baby, just tired." Sadie reached out and took Clara's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around Clara's with a grip that was stronger than it had any right to be. "Liar," Sadie said softly, and fell back asleep. Dawn broke over the ranch like a slow fire. Through the window, Clara watched the sky go from black to purple to gold. Somewhere outside, a rooster crowed. Horses moved in the corral. The sound of men's voices carried from the bunkhouse cowboys, starting their day, the world turning like it always did, indifferent to the wreckage of one woman's carefully guarded heart. Clara smoothed Sadie's hair one more time. Then she squared her shoulders, and began folding the cloths they'd used through the night. She would stay until Sadie was strong enough to travel. 2 days, maybe 3. She would keep her distance from Caleb Thornton. She would be polite, grateful, and gone. That was the plan. But plans Clara Jennings knew better than most had a way of dying in Wyoming. Clara lasted 2 days before the plan started falling apart. It wasn't Caleb who broke it. It was Sadie. The girl recovered fast, the way children do, one day burning with fever the next, sitting up in bed, demanding food and asking questions about everything she could see through the window. By the second morning, she was standing at the glass, pressing her nose against it, watching the cowboys work the horses in the corral. "Clara, that brown one just kicked the fence." "Stay away from the window, Sadie. You're supposed to be resting." "I am resting." I'm resting my legs. My eyes are working fine." Clara bit back a smile. The child's stubbornness was exhausting and beautiful in equal measure. It was the thing that had kept her alive through every boarding house and borrowed bed and cold night. Sadie didn't bend. She was 8 years old and built like iron wrapped in cotton. "Can I go outside?" "No." "Just on the porch?" "No." "Clara, I can see a dog down there. A big one. He's got spots." Sadie May. "I bet he's friendly. I bet if I just went down for 1 minute." "What did I say?" Sadie turned from the window and gave Clara that look, the one that was part frustration, part calculation, and entirely too smart for a child her age. "You said no. But you also said we'd leave soon, and we ain't left. So maybe what you say and what happens ain't always the same thing." Clara set down her sewing. "When did you get so sharp?" "I was born sharp. You just don't notice because you're too busy worrying." A knock at the door saved Clara from having to answer. She opened it to find Hank standing in the hallway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable in the way men look when they've been sent on an errand they didn't volunteer for. "Morning, Mrs. Jennings." "Morning, Hank. Boss wants to know if the little one's feeling up to eating in the dining room today. Rosa made biscuits and gravy." Sadie's voice shot from behind Clara like a bullet. "Yes, she is." Hank grinned. Clara sighed. "Tell Mr. Thornton we'll be down in 10 minutes. Hank nodded and turned to go, then stopped. "Mrs. Jennings." "Yes. He's trying. I just want you to know that. Whatever's going on between you two, and I ain't asking, that's your business. He's trying in the only way he knows how. Which ain't always the smoothest way, but it's honest." He put his hat on and walked away before Clara could respond. The dining room was large, built for a family that never materialized. A long table with 12 chairs, only 3 set, 1 at the head, 2 along the side. Caleb was already seated when they came in, a cup of coffee in front of him, papers spread beside his plate. He stood when they entered. Old habit, old manners, the kind beaten into a man by a father who believed courtesy was armor. "Good morning, Mrs. Jennings." His eyes moved to Sadie. "Feeling better?" "Yes, sir. Are those biscuits?" "They are." "Are they any good?" Caleb's mouth twitched. "Rosa would put a bullet in me if I said otherwise." Sadie climbed into a chair and Clara took the seat beside her. Rosa emerged from the kitchen with plates, biscuits, gravy eggs, thick strips of bacon. She set a glass of milk in front of Sadie and squeezed the girl's shoulder without a word. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Clara kept her eyes on her plate, painfully aware of Caleb at the head of the table, painfully aware of the conversation they hadn't finished, the wound they'd ripped open 2 nights ago and left bleeding in the dark. "Mr. Thornton." Clara's head snapped up. Sadie was looking directly at Caleb, a biscuit in one hand, crumbs on her chin. "Yes. How come you live in this big house all by yourself?" "Sadie." Clara's voice was sharp. "It's a fair question." Caleb set down his coffee. He looked at the child with that careful expression Clara had started to recognize, the one that meant he was taking her seriously. Not as a child to be dismissed, but as a person asking something real. "I reckon I got used to it." "Don't you get lonely?" "Sadie, that's enough." "Sometimes," Caleb said. He held Sadie's gaze. "But lonely's not the worst thing a man can be." "What's the worst thing?" "A coward." The word landed like a stone in still water. Clara felt the ripple. He wasn't talking to Sadie anymore. Not really. "I don't think you're a coward," Sadie said matter-of-factly. "Cowards don't stay up all night for somebody else's sick kid." Clara watched Caleb's face change. Something opened in it just for a heartbeat, like a door blown open by wind. He looked at Sadie, and then at Clara, and in that half-second glance she saw everything he was fighting not to say. "Finish your breakfast, Sadie," Clara said softly. After the meal, Sadie made her escape. She slipped out the back door while Clara was helping Rosa clear plates, and by the time Clara reached the porch, The child was already in the yard, kneeling in the dirt, making friends with the spotted dog she'd seen from the window. Sadie. His name's Biscuit. One of the cowboys told me. Clara started down the steps, but Hank caught her arm gently. Let her be Mrs. Jennings. That dog wouldn't hurt a fly. And the boys'll watch her. They've been asking about her since she got here. She's still recovering. She's 8. Recovering's what they do best. It's us old folks that hold on to sickness. Clara stood on the porch, watching Sadie throw a stick for the dog. The girl's laugh, high, bright, uncomplicated, carried across the yard. 2 cowboys leaned on the corral fence nearby, pretending to work while sneaking glances at the child. One of them tipped his hat to Clara. She nodded back. She likes it here. Hank said it quietly, standing beside her. Children like anywhere there's a dog and space to run. That ain't all she likes. She likes him. Caleb. She asked Rosa this morning if he was a king because he lived in such a big house. Clara's chest tightened. Hank, we're leaving as soon as she's strong enough. Nobody said you weren't. I mean it. I know you do. He paused. But sometimes where you end up is where you're supposed to be, even if you didn't plan on it. Clara didn't answer. She watched Sadie run across the yard, the spotted dog at her heels, and felt the terrible pull of wanting this to be real, wanting this to last, wanting to stop running. Wanting was dangerous. Wanting was how you got destroyed. She went back inside to fold the last of their clothes. She was packing the carpet bag when the door opened behind her. Going somewhere. Caleb stood in the doorway. His face was unreadable, but his eyes tracked to the carpet bag and back to her. We've imposed long enough. Sadie's better. The roads are clear. I need to find work and lodging in town. With what money? The question was blunt, not cruel, just honest. And that was worse because Clara couldn't argue with honest. I'll manage. The way you managed when Grady threw you out, the way you managed walking in 100-degree heat with a child who nearly died. That's not fair. No, it isn't. None of this is fair. That doesn't make it less true. He stepped into the room. Not close, he kept the distance he'd promised with his retreat 2 nights ago. But his presence filled the space anyway. I have a proposition. I'm not interested in charity. It's not charity. It's a job. Clara's hands stilled on the carpet bag. What kind of job? The ranch school. There are 11 children on this property, cowboys' kids mostly. They ride into town for school during the year, but summers they run wild. I've been meaning to hire a teacher for years. Never got around to it. You're making this up. Ask Hank. Ask Rosa. Ask any of the men. I've talked about it every spring and done nothing about it every summer. Clara studied his face, looking for the lie, looking for the angle. She'd spent a decade learning to read men's motives, the way other women read recipes, looking for what was hidden beneath what was offered. You want me to believe that the same week I show up needing work, you suddenly decide to hire a teacher? I want you to believe that sometimes things happen when they're supposed to happen. I'm offering honest work, fair pay, a cottage near the bunkhouse that's been sitting empty since my foreman's wife passed 2 years ago. It's small, but it's clean, and it's yours and Sadie's. And what do you get out of it? 11 children who can read and do sums. That's what I get. They stared at each other. Clara's mind raced every argument for leaving, every reason to run, every warning her battered heart screamed about staying close to this man. But underneath all of that was Sadie's laugh in the yard. The sound of a child who'd found a dog and a wide sky and space to be a kid. I have conditions, Clara said. Name them. I'm your employee, not your guest, not your project, not your way of making up for what happened 10 years ago. You pay me the same wage you'd pay any teacher, and I answer to no one about my personal affairs. Agreed. Sadie is my daughter in every way that matters. Nobody questions that. Nobody suggests otherwise. Nobody treats her as less than because she came from a doorstep instead of a family. If anyone on this ranch treated a child that way, they'd be gone before sunset. And you and I, Clara paused, steadying herself. We keep it professional. Whatever happened between us, whatever almost happened, stays in the past. I can't work for you and carry all that at the same time. Something shifted behind his eyes. Pain, maybe. Acceptance. The quiet defeat of a man who understood he was getting less than he wanted, but more than he deserved. Agreed. His voice was rough. Is that all? That's all. He extended his hand. A handshake. A business arrangement. Clean and simple. Clara took it. His grip was warm and firm and lasting exactly 1 second too long. She felt her pulse jump and hated herself for it. You start Monday, he said. I'll have the cottage ready by tomorrow evening. He left. Clara stood with her hands still tingling, staring at the empty doorway, telling herself she'd made the right choice. Professional. Clean. Simple. She almost believed it. The cottage was better than anything Clara had lived in since Thomas died. 2 rooms, a main space with a cookstove and a small table, and a bedroom just big enough for a double bed, where she and Sadie could sleep. Rosa had put wildflowers in a jar on the table and hung clean curtains. There was a pump out back and a vegetable garden someone had let go wild, but could be brought back with work. Sadie declared it perfect before they'd been inside 30 seconds. It's ours. Really ours. For as long as I have the job. Clara, it's got a real door, with a lock. The child said it with such wonder that Clara had to turn away so Sadie wouldn't see her face. A real door with a lock. That was the standard of luxury for a girl who'd spent 3 years sleeping in rooms where the latch didn't hold. Monday came. Clara walked to the ranch house at 8 sharp and found her classroom a large room off the west side of the house that had been a storage space until 2 days ago. Someone had cleared it out, built rough benches, and hung a chalkboard on the wall. 11 faces stared at her, ages ranging from 6 to 14. All brown from the sun, all suspicious, all waiting to see what this stranger was made of. Good morning. My name is Mrs. Jennings. I'm your teacher. Do we have to be here? A boy of about 12 freckled arms crossed. What's your name? Sam. Well, Sam, you don't have to be here. You can walk right out that door and go back to shoveling horse manure in the barn. Nobody's going to stop you. Sam blinked. Really? Really? But before you go, I want you to know that the men who own the railroads, the banks, and the land offices, the men who decide whether your daddy keeps his job, they can all read and do mathematics. And the reason they can make those decisions is because they sat in a room like this when they were your age and paid attention. So you choose, manure or multiplication. Sam unfolded his arms. I reckon I'll stay. Smart choice. Clara taught, and something inside her that had been dead for a long time started breathing again. She was good at this, better than good. She made the younger children laugh with stories that secretly taught them letters. She challenged the older ones with problems that connected to their lives, calculating feed costs, measuring fence lines, figuring acreage. By Wednesday, even the most reluctant students were arriving early. Caleb noticed. She knew because Hank told her. Boss stood outside the window yesterday listening to you teach fractions. That's a little unsettling, Hank. He wasn't being strange about it. He just listened. I ain't seen that expression on his face before. Like he was watching something he'd given up hoping for. Hank? I know, none of my business. But I'm old, and I've earned the right to say things younger folks won't. The first real crisis came on Thursday. Clara was walking Sadie back to the cottage after supper when a carriage pulled up to the main house. Black expensive, drawn by matched gray horses. Clara recognized wealth when she saw it, not the quiet working kind that Caleb had, but the sharp displayed kind that existed to be noticed. A woman stepped down. 55, maybe 60, with silver blonde hair swept under a hat that cost more than Clara earned in a month. Her dress was Eastern Boston or Philadelphia, not Wyoming. Her face was handsome, in the way polished marble is handsome, all clean lines and cold surfaces. "Sadie, go inside. Lock the door." "But—" "Now, baby." Something in Clara's voice moved the child without argument. Sadie disappeared into the cottage. Clara stood on the path watching. The woman ascended the porch steps as if she owned them. Caleb came out to meet her, and even from 50 yards away, Clara could see the change in him, the way his shoulders squared, the way his jaw set, the way he became the stone version of himself that the world expected. "Aunt Marguerite." "Caleb, you look thin. Are you eating?" "I eat fine. What brings you out here?" "Can't a woman visit her nephew?" "You haven't visited in 8 months, and you sent a rider ahead this time instead of just showing up, which means you want something and you want me prepared. So let's skip the pleasantries." Clara couldn't hear Marguerite's response. They went inside the door, closing behind them. She stood on the path with her heart hammering, staring at that door the way a person stares at a rattlesnake coiled in the grass. Marguerite Thornton. The woman who'd destroyed her life with a handful of lies and a smile. She was here, and Clara was standing on her nephew's property, wearing a dress borrowed from Rosa's closet, teaching ranch children, for wages sleeping in a foreman's widow's cottage. If Marguerite found out who she was, everything would collapse, again. Clara went into the cottage, locked the door, the real door, with the real lock that Sadie loved, and sat at the table with her hands flat on the wood, willing them to stop shaking. "Clara." Sadie was watching her from the bedroom doorway. "Who was that lady?" "Nobody, sweetheart." "You look scared." "I'm not scared." "Yes, you are. Your hands are doing that thing." Clara pulled her hands into her lap. "Go wash up for bed." Sadie obeyed, but she watched Clara the whole way, those brown eyes seeing everything, understanding more than any child should. At 9 o'clock, a knock came at the cottage door. Clara opened it to find Caleb. His face was tight-drawn, the look of a man who'd just fought a battle without weapons. "We need to talk. Your aunt? She's staying the night. She'll be gone tomorrow, but she's asking about you." Clara's blood went cold. "What did you tell her?" "That I hired a school teacher. Nothing more." "She'll find out, Caleb. She always finds out. That's what she does." It was the first time she'd used his name since their agreement. He noticed. She saw him notice, but he didn't comment. "She asked why I hired a widow from Missouri. She asked your maiden name." "What did you say?" "I told her it was none of her concern." "And you think that satisfied her?" "No. I think it made her more curious, which is why I'm here." He leaned against the doorframe, and Clara could see the exhaustion in him, not physical, but the bone-deep tiredness of a man who'd spent his whole life managing a woman who treated people like chess pieces. "She's planning a dinner tomorrow night. She wants to meet you formally." "Absolutely not." "Clara, she will recognize me. Maybe not my face. 10 years and poverty change a person. But my name, my voice, something. She destroyed me once, Caleb. I won't sit at her table and give her the chance to do it again." "You won't be sitting at her table. You'll be sitting at mine." The distinction landed. Clara looked at him, really looked past the walls and the weariness, and saw something she hadn't expected. Defiance. Not against her. For her. "You're going to protect me from your own aunt. I'm going to stop my aunt from hurting someone I care about. Whether you want me to call it protection or Tuesday afternoon, that's your choice. This isn't a joke." "Do I look like I'm joking?" He didn't. He looked deadly serious. He looked like a man who'd drawn a line in the dirt and dared the world to cross it. "If she finds out who I am, she'll make my life here impossible. She'll turn the town against me. She'll find a way to take this job, this cottage, everything. She did it before and she'll do it again. Not this time. Why? What's different? I am." 2 words. The same 2 words he'd used the night Sadie was sick. I shall stay. Simple, direct. A man who said things once and meant them forever. "Come to dinner tomorrow. Sit beside me. Let her look. Let her wonder. And if she tries anything, I will handle it. What does that mean? It means I've spent 10 years living with the consequences of trusting the wrong person. I will not make that mistake again. Not at your expense. Never again at your expense. Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to refuse. Every survival instinct she'd honed over a decade of barely making it scream to take Sadie and run. But there was Caleb in her doorway, with the night behind him, and his heart on his face. And there was the truth she'd been running from since the moment Hank's wagon turned onto this ranch road. She was tired. Tired of running. Tired of being afraid. Tired of letting one woman's cruelty dictate the shape of her entire life. What time is dinner? 7. I don't have anything to wear. Rosa's already pulled something from the attic. My mother's things. She was about your size. Caleb, your mother's clothes. She would have wanted them worn by someone worthy. He straightened from the doorframe. 7 o'clock, the main dining room. He walked away into the dark. Clara closed the door and pressed her forehead against the wood. Tomorrow she would sit across from the woman who'd ruined her. She would do it in a dead woman's dress in a house full of ghosts. She would do it because a man she'd never stopped loving asked her to trust him. God help her. She was going to trust him. From the bedroom, Sadie's voice floated out sleepy and certain. You're going to be brave tomorrow, right, Clara? Clara closed her eyes. How do you always know? Because you always are, even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Clara pressed her hand flat against the door. On the other side, Caleb's footsteps faded toward the main house. On this side, a child who believed in her was falling asleep. Between those two truths, Clara Jennings found something she hadn't felt in 10 years. Not courage exactly, something quieter. Something that felt like the moment before you step off a cliff and discover whether you can fly. She blew out the lamp. She lay down beside Sadie. She stared at the ceiling in the dark. And she did not sleep. Not one single minute. Because tomorrow she would face Marguerite Thornton. And this time she would not be the girl who got erased. This time she would be the woman who stayed. The dress fit like it had been made for her. Clara stood in front of the small mirror in the cottage bedroom, staring at a woman she didn't recognize. The fabric was deep green, not the emerald of wealth, but the forest green of something loved and carefully kept. The collar was high, the sleeves long, the waist cinched with a sash that Rosa had pressed with a hot iron that morning. You look like a painting, Sadie said from the bed. I look like a woman wearing a dead woman's clothes. You look pretty. Stop being mean to yourself. Clara turned from the mirror. Sadie was sitting cross-legged on the quilt Biscuit, the spotted dog, curled at her feet, a battle Clara had lost 2 days ago and given up fighting. You remember what I told you. Stay in the cottage, lock the door, don't open it for anybody except Rosa or Hank. And don't feed Biscuit from the table because he'll get the runs. That's not what I, Sadie. I know. If anything feels wrong, ring the bell and Hank will come. Sadie tilted her head. Clara, why are you so scared of that lady? Clara knelt in front of her. Some people in this world use words the way other people use knives. This woman is one of them. I just need to be careful tonight. Is Mr. Thornton going to be there? Yes. Then you'll be fine. He won't let anybody hurt you. Baby, you've known him a week. I've known Biscuit a week too, and I trust him with my life. Clara kissed her forehead. That's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. You can tell who's good by how they act when nobody's watching. Biscuit shares his bone. Mr. Thornton stayed up all night when I was sick. Same thing. Clara didn't have an answer for that. She held Sadie's face in her hands for a long moment, memorizing it the way she always did, before walking into anything dangerous, as if the child's face were a prayer she could carry with her. I'll be back in 2 hours. I'll be here. With Biscuit. Not feeding him from the table. Clara walked the path to the main house in the fading light. Her boots, the only ones she owned, scuffed and resoled twice, made soft sounds on the packed earth. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Caleb was waiting on the porch. He'd cleaned up dark trousers, white shirt, buttoned to the collar, hair combed back from his face. He looked like a man going into battle dressed for church. His eyes found her on the path and stayed. Something moved in his expression that he didn't try to hide. Not tonight. My mother wore that dress the year my father proposed to her. Rosa told me, if it's too much, I can change. Don't. She'd be honored. He offered his arm. Formal, deliberate. A gesture that said to anyone watching, this woman walks beside me, not behind me. Ready. No. Good. Honest fear is better than false confidence. Let's go. They entered the dining room together. The table was set for 4, Caleb at the head, 2 places along one side, 1 along the other. Silver that hadn't been polished in years gleamed under lamplight. Rosa had outdone herself. Marguerite was already seated. She held a glass of wine with the practiced ease of a woman who'd been holding glasses of wine in other people's houses for 50 years. Her eyes tracked Clara from the doorway to the chair with the precision of a hawk watching a field mouse. So, this is the schoolteacher. Mrs. Jennings, may I present my aunt, Mrs. Marguerite Thornton. Aunt Marguerite, Mrs. Clara Jennings. Charmed. Marguerite didn't stand, didn't extend a hand. She sipped her wine and studied Clara over the rim. Caleb tells me you came from Missouri. That's right. Independence, was it? Yes. And before that, various places. Clara unfolded her napkin, keeping her movements slow and controlled. I moved around quite a bit in my youth. How adventurous. And your late husband, what was his trade? Farming. A farmer's wife, teaching ranch children. How perfectly appropriate. The word dripped. Clara felt it land, the careful condescension, the precise placement of a woman who could insult you while smiling and make you wonder if you'd imagined it. Clara is the best teacher these children have ever had. Caleb's voice cut clean across the table. Sam Parker can do long division now. He couldn't spell his own name 3 weeks ago. I'm sure she's very capable. I merely find it interesting that a widow from Missouri would travel all the way to Wyoming Territory for a teaching position. One might wonder what she was running from. One might also wonder why it matters, Clara said. Marguerite's eyes sharpened. For the first time, her polished expression cracked just a fraction, just enough for Clara to see the predator underneath. It matters, dear, because my nephew's reputation matters. A single man living alone hiring a young widow with a child of questionable origin, surely you can see how that might appear to certain people. Questionable origin. Clara's voice went very quiet, the dangerous kind of quiet. The child. She's not yours by blood, I understand. Adopted or merely collected? Aunt Marguerite. Caleb's tone dropped to something Clara hadn't heard before, cold, controlled, lethal. You will not speak about that child that way in my house. I'm merely raising the concerns that others will raise, Caleb. Someone must think practically. Sadie is under my roof and my protection, as is Mrs. Jennings. If that troubles you, the road to town is well lit tonight. Silence. Marguerite set down her wine glass with a click that sounded like a gunshot. You've changed, she said. Not warmly. Not enough. Not yet. But I'm working on it. Rosa served dinner. The food was excellent roasted chicken potatoes, green beans from the garden, but Clara tasted nothing. She ate mechanically, aware of Marguerite watching her every move with the intensity of a woman cataloging evidence. The conversation shifted to safer ground ranch business, cattle prices, the coming railroad. Caleb steered it with the skill of a man accustomed to managing difficult people. But Clara could feel Marguerite circling patient, waiting for an opening. It came over dessert. Tell me, Mrs. Jennings, did you ever spend time in St. Joseph? I have friends there. Perhaps we know some of the same people. Clara's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. I passed through once or twice, years ago. How many years? I don't recall exactly. Funny. Most people remember St. Joseph. It's quite a lively town, especially during the autumn social season. The harvest balls, the cotillions. Marguerite's eyes locked onto Clara's face with surgical precision. You'd remember if you attended one of those. They're quite memorable. The air in the room changed. Clara felt it the shift from dinner conversation to interrogation the moment Marguerite stopped fishing and started hunting. I've attended many events over the years. I couldn't say which ones in particular. Of course not. It was just a thought. Marguerite dabbed her lips with her napkin. You see, there was a young woman at the St. Joseph Harvest Ball about 10 years ago. Caused quite a stir. She was lovely, as I recall. Brown hair, sharp eyes, very poised for someone of her background. She caught the attention of a certain young man. My nephew, in fact. Caleb's hand tightened on his glass. Aunt Marguerite. The girl vanished naturally. These things always sort themselves out. But I've often wondered what became of her. Bennett, I believe her name was. Ilara. No. Something simpler. Claire, Carol. Clara. Caleb said it like a blade falling. The room went dead silent. Marguerite looked at her nephew, then at Clara. And then something happened that Clara had not expected. The older woman smiled. Not with surprise, with satisfaction. The smile of a woman who had suspected the truth and just had it confirmed. Well, Marguerite said softly, isn't this interesting? It's not what you think. Clara's voice came out steady, though her pulse was screaming. Oh, I think it's exactly what I think. The orphan girl from the ball. 10 years later, sitting at my nephew's table wearing his mother's dress teaching his ranch children. That's not coincidence, dear. That's strategy. That's enough. Caleb pushed back from the table. The chair scraped across the floor with a sound like a growl. Clara didn't know whose ranch this was. She didn't plan any of this. She came to Elk Creek for a teaching job that was stolen from her by the Prescotts. The Prescotts are good people. The Prescotts are your people, which is exactly why the job disappeared the moment Clara arrived. Marguerite's composure flickered. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking, did you know she was coming? Don't be absurd. The teaching position was posted in Missouri papers. Clara answered it 3 months ago. Someone on the town council decided to give the job to the Prescott girl instead. Someone with influence. Someone who might have recognized the name Jennings or Bennett and decided to make a preemptive move. Clara watched this unfold with her heart in her throat. She hadn't considered this. She'd assumed the lost position was bad luck, bureaucratic indifference, the usual cruelty of a world that didn't care about women like her. But Caleb was connecting threads she hadn't seen. You're reaching Caleb. Am I? You intercepted 3 letters Clara sent me 10 years ago. You bribed servants to spread lies about her family. You manufactured documents suggesting she was illegitimate. You did all that to prevent a single dance from becoming something more. So tell me, Aunt Marguerite, is it really so absurd to think you'd sabotage a teaching position? Marguerite stood. Her chair didn't scrape. She rose with the controlled grace of a woman who never let her body betray her emotions. But her hands were shaking. Clara saw them tremble before Marguerite clasped them together. You have no proof of any of that. Not yet. 2 words. Calm. Certain. The voice of a man who'd started digging and intended to reach the bottom no matter what he found. I came here as a kindness. Marguerite said, her voice losing its polish. To warn you that people are talking. A widow. A child. An unmarried man. In a territory where reputation is everything. My reputation is my business. Your reputation is this family's business. Your father. My father is dead, and with respect, so are his rules. Caleb stepped around the table, positioning himself between Marguerite and Clara, not blocking, shielding. You will leave in the morning. You will not speak to Mrs. Jennings again, and you will not interfere in my household. Marguerite looked past Caleb to Clara. And in that look, Clara saw something that chilled her deeper than any Wyoming winter. Not anger. Calculation. The quiet, patient assessment of a woman deciding her next move. You'll regret this, Caleb. Both of you will. She walked out. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, measured unhurried the retreat of someone who'd lost a battle, but not the war. The front door opened and closed. The carriage creaked. Hooves on the road. Then silence. Clara realized she was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She let go, and her hands shook like leaves. She knows. Yes. She'll come back. Probably. She'll try to destroy me again, the way she did before. Caleb turned to face her. His jaw was set, but his eyes were open, wide open, hiding nothing. She'll try. She will fail. How can you be sure? Because last time she fought a girl who was alone. This time she's fighting a woman who isn't. Clara pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. The adrenaline was draining and leaving behind a shaking exhaustion that went to her bones. What did you mean about the letters? You said she intercepted my letters. I started investigating 3 days after you told me the truth. Sent a man to St. Joseph. He found the postmaster who handled mail 10 years ago. Retired now, living on a pension. He remembered. He remembered a woman paying him to hold any letters addressed to the Thornton family from a Clara Bennett. 3 days. You've been investigating for 3 days, and you didn't tell me. I wanted proof before I spoke. I didn't want to give you hope I couldn't back up. That wasn't your decision to make. You're right. It wasn't. No defense. No excuse. He stood there and took it the way he'd taken everything she'd thrown at him, straight on, no flinching. There's more. More? The man I sent also found records. Marguerite paid a printer in Kansas City to forge a document suggesting your mother was a woman named Belle Fontaine, a known confidence artist who worked the riverboats. Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the nearest chair, the air punched from her lungs. My mother. She made up a story about my mother. She created a fiction and planted it where people would find it. Anyone who asked about your background would hit that forged record and stop looking. I don't even know who my mother was. I was left at St. Mary's as an infant. No name, no note, nothing. I know. She took the one thing I didn't have, a mother, and turned it into a weapon against me. Caleb knelt in front of her chair. On his knees on his own dining room floor, this man who owned 5,000 acres and commanded 40 men and answered to nobody. He took her hands in his. I will undo every lie she built, every forged document, every bribed witness, every whispered rumor. I will take it apart piece by piece until there is nothing left but the truth. Why? The word cracked in her throat. Why does this matter so much to you? Because I could have stopped it. 10 years ago, if I'd been braver, if I'd trusted what I felt instead of what I was told, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't have married a stranger. You wouldn't have lost your home. You wouldn't have walked into my ranch half-starved with a child in your arms. Every bad thing that happened to you traces back to one night when I chose comfort over courage. And I will spend the rest of my life making that right, whether you let me love you or not. The words hung in the air between them. Clara looked at his hands holding hers, rough, calloused, scarred from rope and wire and weather. Hands that had held cold cloths to her daughter's forehead at 3 a.m. Hands that shook when they touched her face. You can't fix everything, Caleb. No, but I can fix this. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in. She sat in that chair with her hands in his and let the moment exist without trying to control it or understand it or run from it. Marguerite won't stop, Clara said finally. She'll go to town. She'll talk. By morning, every person in Elk Creek will know who I am and what she claims I am. Let them. Easy for you to say. You're a Thornton. I'm a nobody. You are not a nobody. You are the woman I... He stopped himself, jaw clenched. He'd promised to keep it professional. He'd agreed to her terms. And even now, kneeling on his floor with his heart on his sleeve, he was trying to honor that. The woman you what? The woman I should have fought for. And will. Starting now. He released her hands and stood. The loss of contact hit Clara like cold water. Tomorrow I ride to town. I'm going to see Judge Crawford. He's an honest man, one of the few. I'll present the evidence about the forged documents and the bribed postmaster. I'll file a formal complaint. Against your own aunt. Against anyone who commits fraud. Family doesn't exempt a person from the law. It does in most places. Not in mine. Clara stood smoothing the green dress that suddenly felt heavier than it had an hour ago. And what do? You teach. You take care of Sadie. You live your life on this ranch like it's yours, because it is. No matter what happens with Marguerite, no matter what anyone in that town says, you belong here. I knew it the night I met you, and I was too stupid to act on it. I'm not stupid anymore. You were never stupid. You were hurt. Hurt people make bad choices. Don't make excuses for me. I'm not. I'm making sense of you. There's a difference. They stood in the empty dining room, the remains of a dinner nobody finished growing cold on the table between them. Rose's good china. Polished silver. Candles burning low. I should get back to Sadie, Clara said. I'll walk you. That's not... I'll walk you. They crossed the yard in silence. At the cottage door, Clara turned. The night sky spread above them, bigger than anything she'd seen in Missouri. Stars so thick they looked like spilled salt. Caleb. Yeah. What you said in there. About spending the rest of your life making it right. I meant it. I know you did. That's what scares me. She put her hand on the door handle. Because if you mean it, then I have to decide whether I'm brave enough to let you. And I've been a coward about this for a very long time. You've never been a coward a single day in your life. You don't know that. I know you walked across 3 territories with a child and a carpet bag and not enough money for a meal. I know you stood in my dining room and looked my aunt in the eye without flinching. I know you sat by a sick girl's bed and fought death with peppermint tea and pure stubbornness. He took one step closer. That's not a coward. That's the bravest person I've ever met. Clara felt the tears come and didn't fight them. Not tonight. Tonight she let them fall, 2 quiet lines down her cheeks, because some things were too big to hold inside and too true to pretend away. I'm going to go inside now, she whispered. And I'm going to hold my daughter. And tomorrow I'm going to teach your ranch children long division. And sometime between now and whenever this thing with your aunt is over, I'm going to figure out what I want. Not what's safe, not what's smart. What I want. Can you give me that time? I'll give you anything you ask for. Then give me time. He nodded once, stepped back, tipped an imaginary hat. A cowboy gesture so old-fashioned and sincere it nearly broke her. Good night, Clara. Good night, Caleb. She went inside, locked the door, leaned against it with her eyes closed and her heart pounding so loud she was sure Sadie could hear it. The child was asleep. Biscuit curled at her feet. Clara changed out of the green dress, hung it carefully on the hook behind the door, and climbed into bed. She pulled Sadie close, breathing in the girl's hair soap and dust, and the particular sweetness of a child who'd spent the day in the sun. You're crying again, Sadie mumbled, half asleep. Happy crying. Is that a real thing? Yeah, baby, that's a real thing. Sadie burrowed closer. Good. I like happy crying better. Clara held her tighter and stared into the dark. Somewhere across the yard, a light burned in Caleb's study window. She couldn't see it from the bed, but she knew it was there. The way she'd always known, even across 1,000 miles and 10 wasted years. He was awake. He was planning. He was fighting for her in ways nobody had ever fought for her before. And Marguerite Thornton was in a carriage heading toward town with fury in her chest and calculation in her eyes, already planning her next move. Clara knew this wasn't over. It was barely beginning. But for the first time in a decade, she wasn't facing it alone, and that changed everything. She closed her eyes. Sadie's heartbeat was steady against her chest. Biscuit snored at their feet. And Clara Jennings' widow teacher, mother-by-choice woman, who'd been broken and rebuilt so many times she'd lost count. Clara Jennings made a decision. She was done running. Whatever came next, Marguerite's schemes, the town's judgment, the terrifying possibility of loving Caleb Thornton out loud, she would face it standing up. Not because she wasn't afraid, because Sadie was right. She was always brave when she was scared, especially when she was scared. Marguerite moved fast, faster than Clara expected. By noon the next day, Hank rode back from town with a face like a storm cloud and news that hit like a fist. She's been to every shop on Main Street, telling anyone who'll listen that you're a con artist from Missouri who seduced her nephew to get her hands on the ranch. Clara was standing at the chalkboard, chalk dust on her fingers, 11 children staring at her. She set the chalk down carefully. Children, take out your readers. Practice pages 12 through 15. Quietly. She stepped outside with Hank. He kept his voice low. It gets worse. She went to Judge Crawford before Caleb could. Told him you're an unfit guardian for Sadie. Said the child was taken illegally, no papers, no court order. She's requesting the judge remove Sadie from your custody and place her in the territorial orphanage. Clara's knees buckled. She grabbed the porch rail and held on. She can't do that. She's doing it. Crawford's a fair man, but he's got to follow the law. And the law says a child without legal documentation of guardianship can be claimed by the territory. Sadie is my daughter. I know that. You know that. But paper says different. And Marguerite's got lawyers. Real ones. From Cheyenne. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth. The world was tilting sideways the way it had in Independence, when the creditors came, the way it had in every boarding house doorway when the landlord said, "Get out." But this was worse. This wasn't money or shelter or dignity. This was Sadie. Where's Caleb? Rode to town an hour ago. He don't know about the custody part yet. He went to see Crawford about the forged documents. I need to get to town. Clara, think. If you ride in there right now scared and angry, you'll play right into her hands. She wants you desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. I'm not desperate. I'm furious. Same thing in her playbook. Clara stared down the road toward town. 5 miles of dust and heat between her and the woman trying to take her child. Watch the children for me. Clara. Hank, watch the children. She didn't take a horse. She didn't change clothes. She walked into the cottage, picked up the one document she owned, the letter from the Elk Creek Town Council offering the teaching position, and walked back out. At least take the wagon. I've walked farther for less. She made it 2 miles before the sound of hooves came up behind her. She didn't turn around. She knew the rhythm of that horse. Caleb pulled alongside her. His face was grim. Get on. I'm fine. It's 100 degrees and you're walking to town in a cotton dress with no water. Get on the horse, Clara. Did you hear about Sadie? His jaw tightened. I heard. Just now, Hank sent a rider after me. She's trying to take my daughter Caleb. She won't. You keep saying that, but she keeps doing things. She's always 2 steps ahead. Not this time. He swung down from the horse and stood in front of her, blocking the road. I saw Crawford. I filed the complaint about the forged documents. I also filed something else. What? A petition for legal guardianship of Sadie, with you named as primary guardian and me as supporting petitioner. Clara stared at him. You did what? Crawford owed my father a favor, more than one. He agreed to hear the petition immediately. He's reviewing it right now. You can't just Caleb a single man petitioning for guardianship of a child he's known for 2 weeks. A single man who employs the child's mother, provides housing and schooling, and is prepared to testify under oath that the child is loved, safe, and cared for. Crawford's seen worse cases granted on less evidence. And when Marguerite argues that you're doing this because of me, because of us, because of whatever she thinks is happening between us, then I'll tell the truth, which is that a child's safety matters more than anyone's opinion about anything. Clara's breath came out ragged. She stood on the dusty road with the sun pounding down and this man standing in front of her like a wall between her and everything that wanted to hurt her. "This is too much. I can't owe you this." "You don't owe me anything. This isn't for you. It's for Sadie. Don't do that. Don't pretend this is simple." "I'm not pretending. I'm choosing. There's a difference." He held out his hand. "Now get on the horse. We're going to town together, and we're going to finish this." She took his hand. She got on the horse. He climbed up behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady, and kicked the horse into a canter. They didn't speak for the rest of the ride. They didn't need to. Elk Creek's main street was busier than Clara had ever seen it. Word travels fast in small towns, and Marguerite's campaign had turned their situation into the most interesting thing that had happened since the territorial elections. People stood on porches, leaned in doorways, gathered in clusters outside the general store. Clara felt every pair of eyes. She kept her chin up. She kept her back straight. She walked beside Caleb toward the courthouse with the deliberate stride of a woman who refused to be ashamed. Marguerite was already there. She sat in the front row of the small courtroom, flanked by a man in a city suit who had lawyer written across every crease. Beside them sat a young woman Clara hadn't seen before, blonde, pretty, nervous. Lily Prescott, the niece who'd taken Clara's teaching job. Judge Crawford was behind the bench, a big man with white whiskers and tired eyes that had seen too many cases and too little justice. He looked at Clara and Caleb as they entered. "Mr. Thornton, Mrs. Jennings, take a seat." Clara sat. Her hands were folded in her lap, still as stones. Inside, everything was screaming. "We have two matters before us," Crawford said. "First, Mr. Thornton's complaint regarding alleged document forgery and mail interference by Mrs. Marguerite Thornton. Second, Mrs. Marguerite Thornton's petition to have the minor child, Sadie, removed from Mrs. Jennings' custody due to lack of legal documentation. And third, Mr. Thornton's counter-petition for legal guardianship." He looked over his glasses. "This is going to be a long afternoon." Marguerite's lawyer stood first. His name was Whitfield, and he spoke with the polished cadence of a man who charged by the word. "Your Honor, my client's concerns are straightforward. Mrs. Jennings has no legal claim to the child known as Sadie. No adoption papers, no court order, no documentation of any kind. The child was by Mrs. Jennings' own admission found on a doorstep. Under territorial law, I know the law." "Mr. Whitfield, get to the point." "The point is that the child should be placed in proper custody until legal proceedings can determine her status." "Proper custody meaning the territorial orphanage. It's the appropriate facility." "I grew up in an orphanage." Clara's voice cut the courtroom like a blade. She hadn't planned to speak. She was supposed to wait, let Caleb's lawyer handle it, follow the process. But Whitfield had said orphanage like it was a solution, and something in Clara broke. "Mrs. Jennings, you'll have your turn." "I grew up in St. Mary's Home for Children in Missouri, Your Honor. I know exactly what an orphanage is. I know the cold. I know the hunger. I know what it feels like to sleep in a room with 30 children and not one of them loved." She stood. Caleb reached for her arm, but she was already moving. Sadie was left on a doorstep like a package. Nobody came back for her. Nobody filed a report. Nobody cared. I cared. I fed her, clothed her, taught her to read, held her through fevers and nightmares, and every single day for 3 years I chose her. That is my documentation. That is my legal claim. I chose her and I choose her, and no lawyer from Cheyenne is going to stand in a courtroom and tell me that paperwork matters more than that. Silence. Crawford looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Marguerite. "Mrs. Thornton, your concern for the child's welfare is noted, but I'm inclined to hear more before I make any decisions. Mr. Thornton, you have evidence regarding the forgery complaint." Caleb stood. He was calm, deadly calm. The calm of a man who'd prepared for this the way he prepared for everything, thoroughly, precisely, without wasted motion. "Your Honor, I have here a signed statement from Mr. Harold Finch, former postmaster of St. Joseph, Missouri." He handed a document to the clerk. Mr. Finch confirms that in October of 1868, he was paid the sum of $50 by a woman matching the description of my Aunt Marguerite Thornton to intercept and destroy any correspondence addressed to the Thornton family from a Clara Bennett. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Marguerite sat perfectly still. I also have a signed statement from a Mr. James Polk, printer of Kansas City. Another document. Mr. Polk confirms that he was commissioned to forge a document suggesting that a Clara Bennett of Missouri was the illegitimate daughter of one Belle Fontaine, a known confidence artist. He was paid $75 for this work. He kept a copy of the commission letter. The handwriting has been verified as my aunt's. More murmurs, louder now. And finally, Caleb's voice hardened. I have a sworn deposition from Margaret Sullivan, former domestic servant in my aunt's household, confirming that Mrs. Thornton instructed her to spread specific rumors about Miss Bennett's character at social gatherings in St. Joseph and surrounding areas in the fall and winter of 1868. Crawford took each document, examined them, passed them to the clerk. His expression didn't change, but Clara saw his jaw work the involuntary motion of a man processing something that angered him. Mrs. Thornton, do you wish to respond to these allegations? Marguerite stood. Her composure was immaculate. Not a hair out of place, not a tremor in her voice. Clara had to admire it even as she hated it. These are the fabrications of disgruntled former employees and senile old men. My nephew is clearly under the influence of a manipulative woman who— Choose your next words very carefully, Mrs. Thornton. Crawford's voice dropped. You are in my courtroom. Accusations require evidence. Do you have evidence that these documents are fabricated? I have my word. Your word against 3 sworn statements, 2 of which include corroborating physical evidence. Crawford leaned back. That's not a strong position. Your Honor, this is absurd. I am a Thornton. My family has been part of this territory for— Your family name does not make you immune to the law. Sit down, Mrs. Thornton. Marguerite sat. For the first time, Clara saw a crack, a tiny fracture in the marble facade. The older woman's hand gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles white. Now, Crawford turned to Clara. Mrs. Jennings, regarding the child, Mr. Thornton has filed a guardianship petition on your behalf. I've reviewed it. It's in order. But I have questions. Yes, Your Honor. You've cared for this child for 3 years, without legal standing, without financial security. Why didn't you pursue formal adoption? Because formal adoption requires a stable address, a steady income, and legal representation. For 3 years I had none of those things. I was a widow paying off my dead husband's debts with sewing work. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I could barely afford bread. And now? Now I have a position, a home, an employer willing to support the petition. She didn't look at Caleb. She couldn't. If she looked at him right now, she'd fall apart, and falling apart was not something she could afford. I have everything I didn't have before. All I need is the law to recognize what's already true. And what's that? That Sadie is my daughter. Not by blood, by choice. By 3 years of showing up every single day and never leaving. Crawford was quiet for a long time. The courtroom held its breath. I'm going to grant the guardianship petition, he said, provisionally for 90 days, after which a full hearing will determine permanent status. During that time, Mrs. Jennings will maintain primary custody. Mr. Thornton will serve as secondary guarantor. Clara's legs almost gave out. She grabbed the bench in front of her. Furthermore, Crawford looked directly at Marguerite. Regarding the forgery and interference complaint, I'm referring the matter to the territorial prosecutor. Mrs. Thornton, I'd advise you to retain counsel. You're going to need it. This isn't over, Marguerite said. Her voice was low, controlled, but something burned beneath it. You're making a mistake, Caleb, both of you. The only mistake I ever made was believing you. Caleb's voice carried through the courtroom. Not shouting, he didn't need to. Every word landed with the weight of a man who'd spent 10 years carrying guilt and just set it down. You told me she was a liar. You told me she was beneath me. And I believed you because it was easier than being brave. But I am done being easy, Aunt Marguerite. I am done letting fear make my decisions. He turned to the courtroom: ranchers, shopkeepers, wives, cowboys, the whole cross-section of Elk Creek packed onto wooden benches. Most of you know me. You know I'm not a man who talks much. So I'll keep this short. 10 years ago, I met a woman who saw me, not my name, not my land, not my money. Me. And I let her go because someone in this room told me she wasn't good enough. That was a lie. Clara Jennings is the finest person I have ever known. She is honest. She is brave. She is a better parent to that child than most people with blood claims and legal papers. And if any person in this town, any single one of you, treats her or her daughter with anything less than the respect they deserve, you will answer to me. The courtroom was silent. Not the uncomfortable silence of people who disagree, but the heavy silence of people who've just heard something true and are rearranging their understanding of the world to fit it. Marguerite stood. She gathered her bag, her gloves, her dignity. She walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped and turned back. You're your father's son, Caleb, stubborn to the point of self-destruction. No, ma'am, I'm my mother's son, stubborn to the point of love. Marguerite flinched. It was small, barely visible. But Clara saw it. And she knew, with the certainty of a woman who'd studied cruelty long enough to understand it, that Caleb's words had hit something Marguerite had buried deep. Something human. Something that almost looked like shame. The older woman left. The courtroom door closed behind her. And then Clara was outside on the courthouse steps with the afternoon sun blazing and the whole town watching, and Caleb beside her, and she couldn't breathe. Clara, give me a minute. Take all the time you need. She sat on the steps. She put her head between her knees and breathed in, out and out, the way she'd taught herself during every crisis for 10 years. Survive first. Feel later. But the feeling came anyway. It came like a dam breaking, like a river that had been held back too long and couldn't be stopped. She sat on the courthouse steps of a town she'd known for 2 weeks and cried. Not silent tears, not the controlled, invisible crying she'd perfected. Real, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs that came from the deepest part of her and refused to be quiet. Caleb sat beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He just sat there, solid and warm and present, while she fell apart on the steps of the Elk Creek courthouse. When it passed, when the sobs slowed to shudders, and the shudders to stillness, she wiped her face with her sleeve and looked at him. You just told an entire town you love me. I told an entire town the truth. Whether that includes the word love is up to you. Caleb. Clara. I'm sitting on courthouse steps with a blotchy face and a borrowed dress and no money and a child who isn't legally mine for another 90 days. This is not how love stories are supposed to go. I don't know about stories. I only know about this. He turned to face her. I know that when you walked onto my ranch, something in me woke up that I thought was dead. I know that watching you care for Sadie taught me more about courage than 30 years of running cattle. And I know that if you walk away from me right now, I will respect it, and I will never stop regretting it. I'm not walking away. The words came out before she could stop them. Before the fear could intervene. Before the caution could build its wall, before 10 years of self-protection could slam the door. I'm not walking away, Caleb. I tried. God knows I tried. I tried when I was 18 and you disappeared. I tried when I married Thomas. I tried every night for 10 years when I told myself you were just a dance and a conversation and a stupid girl's dream. She took his hand, right there on the courthouse steps, with half of Elk Creek watching from porches and storefronts. But I'm done trying, because Sadie was right. You can tell who's good by how they act when nobody's watching. And you stayed up all night for a stranger's sick child. And you got on your knees on your own dining room floor. And you stood in a courtroom and told the truth, even though it cost you your only family. You're my family. He said it simply, without drama, without performance. The way a man states a fact he's certain of. You and Sadie. That's what I want. If you'll have me. I'll have you. Clara laughed a wet, broken, beautiful sound. God help me, I'll have you. But I swear, Caleb Thornton, if you disappear on me again, I won't. If you listen to anyone who tells you I'm not enough, you are more than enough. You've always been more than enough. If you break that little girl's heart, I will spend every day of my life making sure she never doubts she's loved. Both of you. Every single day. Clara looked at their joined hands. His rough, scarred, strong. Hers smaller, calloused from sewing and scrubbing and gripping a child's hand through every storm life threw at them. Ask me, she whispered. Ask you what? You know what? You've known since the night you danced with me in St. Joseph. Ask me the thing you should have asked 10 years ago. Caleb looked at her. The amber eyes she'd dreamed about. The face she'd loved at 18 and loved more now, lined, weathered, imperfect, real. Clara Jennings, will you marry me? Yes. One word. No hesitation, no conditions, no fear. Yes. He kissed her, right there on the courthouse steps, with the whole town watching and the July sun pouring down like a benediction. Not a gentle kiss, not a polite kiss. A kiss that said, I found you, and I'm keeping you, and nothing on this earth will make me let go again. When they broke apart, someone was clapping. Then someone else. Then the whole street, cowboys, shopkeepers, the woman from the general store, even the clerk from the land office who'd told Clara things change. Things change. Yes, they did. Sometimes they changed for the worse. And sometimes, rarely beautifully, against all odds, they changed for the better. They rode back to the ranch together. Clara in front, Caleb behind her, his arm around her waist like it had been made to fit there. The horse walked slow. Neither of them minded. Sadie was on the porch when they arrived. Biscuit sat beside her, tail wagging. The girl took one look at Clara's face, tear-streaked, sunburned, smiling, and knew. You're staying. We're staying. For real this time, not the kind of staying where you pack the bag at night just in case. Clara dismounted and knelt in the dirt. She took Sadie's hands, small, brown, rough, from a week of playing with a dog and climbing fences and being a child for the first time in her life. For real this time. No packed bags, no just in case. And Mr. Thornton? Caleb stepped forward. He knelt to both knees in the dirt, eye level, with an 8-year-old girl who saw everything and forgave nothing. Sadie, I'd like to ask you something. Okay. I asked your mama to marry me. She said yes. But it doesn't count unless you say yes too. Because this isn't just about me and her. It's about all three of us. A family. So I'm asking you. Will you let me be your father? Sadie looked at him for a long time. Those brown eyes, the ones that had seen doorsteps and boarding houses, and closed doors and cold nights, studied him with the seriousness of a judge and the directness of a child who had no patience for pretense. Will you teach me to ride a horse? Yes. A real horse, not a pony. When you're big enough, a real horse. And Biscuit can sleep inside. Biscuit can sleep wherever Biscuit wants. And you won't ever leave, even when things get hard, even when Clara cries, even when I'm bad. Even then, especially then. Sadie looked at Clara. Clara nodded, tears streaming. Okay, Sadie said. Yes, but I'm not calling you Papa until I'm ready. Fair enough. I might call you Caleb for a while. That works. Or Boss. Hank calls you Boss. Caleb laughed. A real laugh, full deep, the sound of a man who hadn't laughed in years, discovering he still knew how. He pulled Sadie into his arms and held her. And Clara wrapped herself around both of them. And for a long moment, nobody moved. Hank stood by the corral fence watching. Rosa stood in the kitchen doorway, pressing a dish towel to her eyes. 2 cowboys leaned on the barn hats, tipped back, grinning like fools. This was it. The thing Clara had stopped believing in. The thing she'd told herself only existed in stories told to girls who hadn't yet learned how the world really worked. A home. A family. A man who stayed. Not because the world was kind. Not because justice was guaranteed. Not because the fight was over. It wasn't. Marguerite would appeal. Lawyers would send letters. Society would whisper. But none of that mattered. Not today. Not in this moment. Because Clara Jennings had walked across 3 territories with a child and a carpetbag, and nothing but a stubborn refusal to stop putting one foot in front of the other. And she had ended up exactly where she was supposed to be. That evening, Sadie fell asleep on Caleb's porch with biscuit across her legs and a half-eaten biscuit in her hand. Clara sat beside her on the porch swing, and Caleb sat on the other side, his arm stretched along the back of the swing, his fingers just brushing Clara's shoulder. Caleb. Yeah. Why do you think you recognized me that first day when Hank brought us in? You didn't know my face, you didn't know my name, but you asked if we'd met. He was quiet for a while. I don't know. Something in your voice, maybe. Or the way you held that child like you'd fight God himself to keep her safe. I'd only ever seen one person with that kind of fire. Your mother. And you. That night in St. Joseph. You told me shame was a cage. Nobody had ever said anything like that to me before. Nobody had ever talked to me like I was just a person instead of a name. I think my heart recognized you before my head caught up. Your heart's smarter than your head. Always has been. Took me 10 years to listen to it. Clara leaned into him. His arm came around her, pulling her close. Sadie snored softly between them. Biscuit twitched in a dream. Are you scared? Caleb asked. Terrified. Of what? Of being happy. I don't know how to do it. I never learned. Neither did I. So what do? We figure it out, together. Same way you teach those kids long division one step at a time, with patience and stubbornness, and the belief that the answer exists even when you can't see it yet. Clara smiled. A real smile. The kind that starts deep in the chest and works its way up and changes the whole shape of a face. You know what Sadie asked me the day we got here? She asked if we were going to sleep outside, and I promised her no, and I lied. I had no idea where we'd sleep. I had nothing. And now? Clara looked at the ranch, the house, the barn, the corrals, the endless sky turning purple and gold as the sun went down. She looked at Sadie sleeping safe. She looked at Caleb watching her with those amber eyes that had haunted her for a decade. Now I have everything. He kissed her forehead. She closed her eyes. And Clara Jennings, orphan widow, teacher, mother, survivor, finally stopped running. Not because the road ended, but because she'd found the place where the road had been leading all along. Some stories don't end with a wedding or a sunset or a final kiss. Some stories end with a woman on a porch holding the people she loves, knowing that tomorrow will bring its own battles and its own blessings. Knowing that the fight isn't over and never will be. Knowing that happiness isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every morning when you open your eyes and decide to stay. Clara chose to stay. And that was enough. That was everything.